So welcome everyone to our webinar this afternoon on current frauds and trends affecting seniors. We're pleased today to be joined by our speakers from the Ontario Provincial Police, who we'll introduce momentarily. And we are co-hosting this event today with our colleagues from the Canadian Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse, Benedict Shefflin, and she will be giving a little overview of her organization in a few minutes. So welcome. People do know that this is Fraud Prevention Month, so there's been lots of activity happening around fraud prevention. So we hope that you'll learn a lot more today so you can help prevent that from happening to yourselves. Before we get going, I'd like to provide our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we gather on the traditional territory of a number of First Nations and acknowledge their stewardship of this land throughout the ages. We seek a new relationship with the original peoples of this land, one that is based in honor and deep respect. I just want to provide a few housekeeping items. Everybody will be muted during the presentation. Our speakers will be visible during the session, during Q&A as well. We'll turn off the slides so you can see everybody and answer questions. We are fortunate again to have our ASL interpreters with us today. As you can see, they are on screen. You can make your screen more visible, put it in, make the screen larger. If you want to pull that over to see the speakers bigger on your own screen, you can individualize that yourselves. We also have our chat box, which Benedict has started already. Please put any comments, suggestions that you'd like to post on the chat box. She'll be responding to those. If you have a specific question for our panelists, please put that in the chat box so we don't miss your responses. We have lots of discussion that usually happens in the chat box. So if you have a specific question, we want to make sure we don't miss it. So put that in the question box. We will try to monitor that as best we can and maybe remind you if you forget, because it's easy to do. And we will post that as well. I have also turned on closed captioning. You can turn that on or off on your own computers as well, just adding another form of accessibility for those who have joined us today. The session is being recorded and will be posted on our website within the next day. We will also post the PDF of their PowerPoint presentation today, so people who missed some of the key tips that our speakers will present today, that you can find those as well as any of the links that we post in our chat box, which we have quite a few, some resources and phone numbers, etc., that you might be interested in having after the session. And lastly, just an evaluation. We do like to hear back from the individuals participating. If you want different topics in the future, if you learned things from today's session, we do appreciate you taking about 2-3 minutes, just providing that quick feedback after the session. We greatly appreciate it. You'll see a pop-up maybe happen after we close the session, and you'll also get a follow-up email with the link to the recording and to the evaluation as well. And before we introduce our speakers, just lastly, just respecting people's privacy and confidentiality. This is a public forum, so we do appreciate that we want to maintain your privacy. So if you keep questions more in a general sense, as opposed to something more specific in terms of people's maybe identifiers, that would be appreciated. Just we're more than happy to help people after the session, whether that's our panelists or Benedict or myself from our organizations. We can email us. Our contact information will be available at the end of the session as well. So for those who haven't joined our webinar in the past, a little bit about who we are as our organization of Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario. We are a nonprofit organization where our mission is really to make sure that seniors have a strong voice, feel safe and respected. And we're funded through the Ontario Ministry for Seniors and Accessibility, and we implement Ontario's strategy to combat elder abuse, which has 3 main pillars: public education and awareness, so forums such as this today. We have World Elder Abuse Awareness Day coming up, which the CNPEA and EAPO are working together again this year to promote across Canada. And we do training to frontline staff and also work with our community partners. Many of you may be joining us today to strengthen the response to elder abuse in our communities across Ontario. And Benedict?
Hi, everyone. So as Ryan said, I'm Benedict Chaplin. I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse. So if you've attended EAPO and CNPEA webinars before, you know about us. We are the only pan-Canadian network that is tackling the issue of elder abuse prevention, neglect prevention, and ageism prevention. And we focus a lot of our efforts on awareness building and public education. So through things such as these webinars that we're doing. I am very happy to be here today for this very important topic. I think all of us have noticed an uptick in media articles about the issue of fraud and scams targeting older people. So I'm glad you could join us today to learn more about this. As Rayanne said, I'll be behind the chat box and the Q&A. So quick update, I put it in the chat box for comments, interacting with each other, sharing resources. Q&A box to ask questions to our presenters. We'll read them at the end. We'll take about 10 to 15 minutes, so you still have time. Yeah, I'll be there monitoring that. And I guess, Rayanne, back to you.
Great, thank you. So just to, gives me great honor to introduce our speakers today. We have three panelists who will be joining us. The first I'd like to introduce is Detective Constable John Armit. He is the works in the Economic Crime and Corruption Unit in Ottawa area, and he is a detective in the Anti-Rackets branch. So he has 22 years of experience he's also worked in investigations, major crime and traffic services, as well as community service and media officer. You've probably seen him or heard him on the media in the last month. He's very, very busy getting the word out around prevention. I've had some conversations with John, and he's very passionate about the work that he does. And you will get that sense today when he's giving his presentation about how we can stop these crimes from happening and protect seniors in our communities from being defrauded of their life savings. And we have also with us today Constable Lisa Cruz and Constable Aaron Fraser, who are members of the crime prevention team at the Serious Fraud Office. They work to support the investigations, to assist victims, and work with policing, private and public partners in fighting against fraud. And they work towards education, empowering citizens to prevent themselves from being victimized. I've had the privilege of meeting both of these constables in the past. So it gives me opportunity now, we get to work together virtually, again, to continue the work that you're doing in terms of fraud prevention. So welcome, both of you. I'm going to now turn my screen off and turn it over to John to share his screen to start his presentation.
There we are. Well, thanks for having us. It's great to have these partnerships and to share the word. As you mentioned, March is Fraud Prevention Month across Canada. We work very closely with our policing partners and all of our community partners. And SFO works closely with my branch in the Anti-Rackets branch to tackle cybercrime and major fraud, multi-jurisdictional fraud. So we'll get into the presentation about what fraud trends we're seeing and fraud specifically targeting seniors or elderly people. So a lot of people have a question: what is the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre? I had the distinct privilege of working at the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre for 18 months as a law enforcement liaison officer nationally, internationally. And that allows us to be exposed to all the different fraud trends across Canada and throughout the world. The Canadian Fraud Centre was originally started by the OPP back in the day in North Bay, and it was called Phone Busters, as we all probably remember. We had little stickers on our phones and our fridges. So the popularity of Phone Busters expanded, and we connected with the CNPEA and the Competition Bureau to form the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. So the OPP is one of the main three partners. We fund and contribute resources and staff to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. The Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre is located in North Bay, and here's a picture of the old Teachers College. That's a multi-purpose building now. So what is the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre? Well, we're Canada's central repository for information and intelligence dealing with cyber-enabled fraud and fraud. We have a call center. We have various different units that support not only seniors, government, private businesses, and law enforcement. So we have 3 units, and why is this important to know? Well, our fraud prevention and intake unit is staffed with call takers that take on average about 250 calls a day. If you can't get through to our call takers, we suggest you report online. And we see over 30 what we call fraud types that we have grouped together because there's so many different variations of frauds. So the unit also works with fraud prevention, and there's some links that we can show you and some email distribution lists that you can get attached to be able to get current trends and bulletins on different fraud types that may affect you or family members in your communities. The second unit is the senior support unit, and Stephanie Senecal, she's a OPP civilian that manages this, and we recruit senior volunteers, also students that support seniors. So it's seniors helping seniors. They provide presentations, awareness campaigns, resources, materials to help out victims. So if a victim over the age of 60 has been identified and is at risk, we can have one-on-one sort of support for those victims. And that helps the victims sort of identify where to go, who to turn to, advocate on their behalf, and also help rebuild their financial life after they've been victimized. We know that seniors tend to lose 33% more than the average victim. The unit that I co-managed was the operational support unit, and that's where we have disruption services. We share intelligence with law enforcement. We coordinate and we do what's called deconfliction. So the whole theme behind this is if you are a victim of fraud or attempted fraud, please report to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre because your information gets turned into intelligence. We may be able to identify different victims in different areas. So how prolific is what I call the tsunami of cyber-enabled fraud? And what is cyber-enabled fraud? Well, we know that 75% of our fraud occurrences that come to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre are cyber-enabled, which means they're facilitated through some sort of form of technology. When I first started, our losses in 2020 was $164 million. That was the highest reported fraud loss we'd ever seen. I couldn't believe how busy we got, and it represented the numbers, which was 379 million in reported losses. You have to remember that only on average 5 to 10% of victims actually report their crimes to law enforcement or to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. Well, shortly after that, we saw a massive explosion in 2022, where our fraud losses hit $500 million at 530 million in reported losses. So what do victims look like in Canada here? Well, we call it mass marketing frauds. It impacts all regions of Canada, and it correlates to population density. So that's why people, see Ontario as having the highest fraud losses. It's because our population is largest. Our victims span all educational and socioeconomic backgrounds and levels, and are evenly distributed between males and females. As I mentioned, seniors tend to lose on average 33% more. What we are seeing is a massive explosion in a younger generation or demographics, and that has to do with people under the age of 60, and that correlates directly with cryptocurrency investment frauds. So how are victims sending money? Now, we know that wire transfer is still the number one remittance where victims are sending money. Typically, it happens where the funds are going overseas, and that has a large portion to do with what we call investment frauds or romance frauds. And we're even seeing this in business email compromise frauds. The next is cryptocurrency. We've seen an explosion in the use of cryptocurrency. And the reason why cryptocurrency is utilized with fraudsters, cryptocurrency itself is not a bad thing. It's just like cash, but the fraudsters have utilized that in order to move bulk amounts of finances across the world within short order of time. So once you send your crypto, you can't get it back unless the police or the organization sees that crypto and sends it back to your wallet. And a wallet is an account. Our next amount of crypto losses have to do with unknown. It's reporting that we receive where the reporter hasn't told us exactly what the method of remittance was. E-transfer is number 4, and that has to do with classified ads that you're going to see, your Kijiji ads. We tend to see a lot of seniors being used as money mules in different frauds. So their accounts are being used as flow through account from one account to the next, to the next, to the next. And the fraudsters do this to make it difficult for law enforcement to investigate, because we have to write a search warrant. It takes that financial institution time to get the money or the information to us. Then we find it's gone to another account, and it's that same sort of tack on of time. And so, you know, it could take police maybe 5 or 6 search warrants in order to get this information. We're also seeing this with job scams and loan scams. The next one is the direct deposit, where we're seeing 8.3 million, and that has to do with something called business email compromise. We are seeing a large portion of cash being used, and that has to do with the grandparent scam, which we're going to get into. We call that the emergency grandparent scam. But the fraudsters, they don't care what method of remittance it is. They just want your money, and they'll throw different pitches at you to get your money. So looking here, we see our stats for 2022. You're going to see that investment frauds represented our largest losses, 308 million, in fact, that was reported to us. So here we have the investment fraud, and we're going to get into how it works. Romance frauds and investment frauds are the lowest amount of reported victims for the highest amount of losses. We've just finished a rather large media campaign centering around the emergency grandparent scam, and we had $9.2 million in losses to that. Service scams are your typical East Indian call center scams, where you're getting, you know, the phone call, you press 1, you end up speaking with someone with an accent. They tell you maybe your SIM card has been compromised, or CRA is going to come and arrest you if you don't pay a fine, or they try and intimidate you, making it seem like it's a government official calling you. That's the service scams. And then extortion scams, very similar. So some of the service scams we're seeing are the door-to-door, the duct cleaning, or the pop-ups that may come up on your computer saying your McAfee software for virus detection has expired. You need to pay money to get it. So these are the different variations that we see. As I mentioned, cryptocurrency, the investment frauds represented 308 million. This is a massive jump compared to 2021, where it was 163 million. So how does this work? And you're going to see here that crypto payments jumped from 87 million to 103 million as a remittance. So what happens with our crypto investment frauds is that victims will search online and look to wanting to jump in the crypto phase. It was really popular a long time ago when Bitcoin was worth next to nothing. People held on, the valuation went up to $60,000 per Bitcoin. And so people want to still jump into that. They believe they're going to make a massive amount of money. And for a lot of elderly victims and seniors that are on fixed income, this is very appealing. So they're going to go online. They're going to type in crypto investment fraud. You're actually going to be given a search results of the top search results, which the fraudsters actually pay for to be on the top level. So you're actually communicating directly with these fraudsters. So these fraudsters are going to educate you on cryptocurrency, how to purchase it. They're going to suggest that you download a software. AnyDesk is one of the more popular ones. And they're going to, ask you to download their trading platforms. They're going to show you how to purchase your cryptocurrency from your regular bank account to an exchanger, which is like a bank. And they're going to show you how your investment opportunity has jumped up. This is all fraudulent. Before you know it, they're going to tell you that your investment has jumped substantially. And then they're going to say, well, if you want to withdraw your funds, you're going to have to pay a capital gains or a crypto tax. There's no such thing. And what we're seeing on average is about $150,000 in losses related to this. So we're also seeing fraud pitches of initial coin offerings. So someone may create a new cryptocurrency type of coin and saying this is the time to get into this craze. And we'll let Aaron and Lisa jump into a romance fraud.
Thanks, John. So moving on to romance fraud. Sorry, my screen here is just taking a few minutes to load. Oops. Is it loading on your end, John? Maybe it's just my internet connection.
Yeah, it's all ready to go here.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we're good. And the romance scam is up on the screen.
Okay, perfect. I think it's just my internet connection there. It popped up that it was unstable. So, okay, so on to the romance fraud. So Canadian romance fraud victims reported losing over 59 million to fraudsters. That was in 2022, compared to 65 million reported losses in 2021. For Ontario victims, reported over 20.3 million. Alberta was over 10 million. BC victims, 8.7 million, and Quebec victims over 7.1 million. Saskatchewan and Manitoba victims was over 7.1 million. I'm good for the next slide, John. So what happens typically in for the romance scam, these scammers are using technology to convince you to enter onto online relationships, and they're wanting to gain your trust and affection. This is often occurring through email messages, fake profiles on social media, and online chat groups, and fake profiles that they've created on dating websites. One way these fraudsters engage is by sending random text messages to you. Similar to that. And once you respond to these messages, a conversation is started with this fraudster, and their attempts is to try and build that relationship with you. So our recommendation is best not to engage with them. Just delete these kinds of messages, whether it's on social media, text message, or an email even. Since it's too easy to get caught up with these scammers that are very persuasive and they're flattering messages. And then once these scammers, they feel that they've gained your trust or built that relationship with you, they're often going to ask you for money. There's several variations to this. They could be to pay for travel, stories about medical emergencies for their family or themselves, or trying to convince you to invest into a fraudulent cryptocurrency platform, and then turning you into a money mule essentially without you actually knowing what's occurring. Some red flags to watch out for and be suspicious of for the romance scam. When someone you haven't actually met in person is professing their love to you, that's a big red flag. Or if they're professing their love to you very, very quickly after just a few days or weeks. If the person wants to move quickly to a private mode of communication, so if you're on a dating website platform or social media, they're often going to ask you, let's communicate by text message. So they have you off of those public sites. And they always have an excuse why they can't meet you in person. You'll never actually meet them in person because they'll always come up with some type of excuse. And just watch out for if you're receiving any poorly written messages, sometimes even the addressing you as the wrong name or somebody else, because maybe they're talking to several other people. And then if the individual claims to be working overseas, that's a big red flag. They claim that they're overseas, but could be from your area to make it seem or appear more legit. And of course, like all these scammers, they create a sense of urgency, try to play on your emotions. They could get angry or guilt you into asking you to send them money. And then the last one, if the individual discourages you from discussing any of this situation that's going on with, family or friends, just be very suspicious of that, because they're attempting to, isolate you from others who may recognize that this is a scam. Perfect. And we'll jump over to service scams. So victims have reported losing over 20.5 million in 2022, compared to 11.8 million losses in 2021. So Ontario victims reported 8.1 million, which is over 8.1 million. BC victims over 1.9 million. In Alberta, 1.6 million. In Quebec, 1.4, and then Saskatchewan reported over 207,000. Okay, next slide, John. So service scams, they're often categorized as any false, deceptive, or misleading or fraudulent promotion of solicitation for services. There are a variety of these service scams out there. They include financial services, telecommunication, cell phone service providers, insurance, tech support scams, Microsoft scam, immigration, air duct cleaning and renovations. One current scam to be very vigilant about right now, it is occurring, is the door-to-door service scams. These scammers, they're attending your front door, they're unannounced, they're misleading you into signing contracts for different types of home equipment that you actually don't need for your home or you actually never wanted. Examples are like furnaces, air conditioners, HEPA filters, air purifiers, water treatment equipment. And then after signing these contracts, once these fraudsters get into your home and very persuasive into talking you into these contracts, unfortunately, these homeowners, they're not being told that liens are going to be placed on their home title for this type of equipment, even when you're making a long-term monthly payments towards them. And then often these fraudsters, they're returning multiple times. They're coming back, trying to convince you into more contracts for more services or equipment to your home. And they often will make claims that you're entitled to things like a green grant that's from the government, potentially because you've put all this equipment into your home and it could be more efficient, more green, and that you could be entitled to this grant money, but the money wouldn't actually go into your pocket. It can only be used towards home renovations. So that's kind of a red flag there to watch out for. These homeowners, unfortunately, are getting duped into signing mortgage documents. These homeowners, they do not know what they're signing because these fraudsters, they're making it very tricky and even having you sign blank documents. So in the end, you're going to be tricked into thinking that this grant money you receive is actually money that's going to be coming from the equity in your home. And you end up handing that over to the bad actors who are coming in to do the renovations. So if you think you might be a victim of this type of scam, a good place to start is requesting a land registry check at the land registry office. This can be done online for just a minimal fee, but it's a great place to start to check to see if you have any liens on your home. And you can also start with checking Equifax or TransUnion as well. And then if you have been a victim after you've checked these or if you feel you have, it's best to report it to your local police. And then you can also to the CAFC, and then maybe inquire with a civil lawyer for any future or further assistance to do with that. Perfect. And I think just in the chat, it was updated the contacts for Equifax and TransUnion. Great. And I think I'm going to hand it over to Aaron.
Can everybody hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Okay, thanks. I'm going to talk about extortion fraud now. So Canadian extortion fraud victims reported losing over $19 million to fraudsters in 2022. And then the slide is up. There's just numbers for a few provinces there. The top number, $6.9 million in losses to Alberta victims. And then 4.8 million to Ontario victims and so forth. John, I'll get you to go to the next slide. All right, so with these extortion frauds, it's the most common type of fraud where impersonation tactics are used. So by that, I mean someone is calling you, texting you, emailing you, telling you that they're some kind of official, whether or not it's a police officer, a lawyer, a government official, somebody from CRA. So they're going to send you out information, and there's variations in this. So the first one here that's listed on the screen is the social insurance number. This happened to a friend of mine recently, actually, where she received a phone call and, you're asked to press 1 to speak to an operator, and the person on the line was telling her that her SIN number was compromised, that she quite possibly is not going to be able to work in Canada anymore. And could she please verify her social insurance number? And this works on probability, right? They phone tons of people and hope that they're catching somebody at a bad moment or a coincidental moment, whereas this person that they called at this time was off work for a time, going to be returning to work soon. So this caught her at a bad time. She gave over her social insurance number, and they're asking for a date of birth, name, address, and whatnot. Of course, they're not doing it in a friendly manner. It's they're expressing that this is very urgent, that you've done something wrong. They'll tell you anything to get this information from you. If not only getting your personal information that they should not have, they are then seeing how far they can get and asking you to withdraw money and get it into a safe account. So a good red flag is if somebody is really rushing you, try and slow things down, think it over, recognize that the Canada Revenue Agency doesn't call you for this. They're not going to, threaten your either your deportation or threaten arrest. So just slow down, talk to somebody about it, and you can always call the Canada Revenue Agency on your own, find that number on your own. Another thing to look out for is it's tax season. So it's going to be high season for those kind of phone calls, texts, and emails. Just be on alert for it now. And here we are at emergency frauds. I'll just give you the overall picture, the Canadian landscape. Canadian victims reported losing over $9.2 million to fraudsters in 2022. Next slide, please, John. Great. And a big one that you will hear in the media right now, and I know John just did a campaign on this. I think you mentioned it before, just awareness around the emergency fraud. It's often called the grandparent scam. And that is because many times older adults are being cold called on their landlines saying that someone is on the line telling them that it's their grandchild and they're in an emergency and they need their help right away. So they could be saying that they're in a car accident, they hurt somebody, they're sick, they need your help. Basically, whatever they're saying, they want your money. Oftentimes they work with more than one person. So there's one purporting to be your grandson or granddaughter, as well as, oh, here's the lawyer or the police officer. It's just, again, take your time, slow down, know that no official like that is going to call and ask for your money. What you should do is kind of take a step back, hang up the phone, and then, call your loved one. You'll probably in the end realize that they're sitting down watching TV and they're not in peril at all. So just take that time and figure things out on your own. That brings me to the end of the frauds that I'm going to touch on, and then John's going to get into these slides. But before I do, we've gone over some tips. And the other thing we really want to emphasize is that there oftentimes is stigma related to being the victim of a fraud. And we're here to hopefully spread the word that has to stop, because the more we talk about it, the more as a victim, the more it helps you. And if we spread the word and tell people about frauds that either almost happened to us or did happen to us, then that can help other people. And like John said, reporting it is really important as well. And that would be to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre and your local police. Just know that if you are the victim, it is very stressful to take, to work through the bad that somebody else has caused you, but get yourself the help that you need, whether or not it is talking to your family or friends or a professional as well. Keep doing the things that you like, exercising, reading, all of those things, your stress relievers, because it will be tough, but there are people there to help you. So John, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, that was excellent, ladies. So you folks can probably see the theme. They're going to throw at whatever pitch they think they can do to get your money out of you. We say at the Canadian Fraud Centre, take 5 and talk to 2 people. So whatever pitch is coming at you, they're always going to go and with a sense of urgency. So, you know, call some friends and say, hey, look, I just had this phone call or this text message or this email. What do you think about it? And 9 times out of 10, your friends are gonna be like, actually, I saw something on social media. I saw something in the newspaper. I saw something in the news, or, you know, it was over a conversation with friends over coffee. So in February, we decided before the Fraud Prevention Month launch, we want to focus on these emergency grandparent scams, and they're prolific. Let's face it, these scams are all organized crime, whether in Canada or they're globalized. And with the use of social media, with the use of technology, they can touch you through your computer at any given point. So always be wary who's trying to get into your direct messaging, who's trying to make a friend request on whatever social media. So we decided for fraud prevention, or before Fraud Prevention Month, to do it just a 1-week blitz to the media on the emergency grandparent scam. And as mentioned before, the one thing that we can suggest to folks is talk with your loved ones, talk with your other friends, and try and come up with a specific code word that you only know with each other if there is an emergency. So this is a graphic image that we came up with our social media, and it really does lay out what it is. It's these scammers are calling landlines. They're asking people to take money out, and the money's going to organized crime. So we're saying no fraud. Let's see here. Okay, so what we did is we launched our joint media release with the RCMP and the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre to raise awareness. The Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, you'll see in the top right here, has bulletins. We can share a link. You can go to Partners at Any Fraud Centre to get on the distribution list. They'll come out with the trends that we're seeing at the Anti-Fraud Centre, and then putting out the bulletin to raise awareness. So if you jump onto these and you receive them, then you can share them with your friends and family. We did a live chat with this gentleman, Terry here. Terry's just a gem of a person. He got a phone call saying his grandson was in trouble. They were in a car accident and they found drugs in his grandson's car. I actually, through our work, we end up working with Terry, and we were able to save Terry $8,000 right before Christmas. His wife is ill. His brother had just died in a car accident. He was having to go through surgery. So it was just, this would have been the worst thing right before Christmas, to lose $8,000. And let's face it, who has that money laying around? So we did a live chat with Terry. He was great. Here's our social media post with the RCMP. And here's a handout. So as I mentioned, we decided to try and figure out how we can connect with our elderly and our seniors in our communities. We came up with a lock it or lose it type form. You'll see on the left-hand side here. So this is available to anyone. If you have a group that you associate with in your community, a library, we can get these out to you, and you can hand them out to the associations. Here we have the Partners at Anti-Fraud Centre. Anyone can jump on and send email to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, asked to be part of the dissemination group. In this, we basically developed this in French and English. We put it out to all our law enforcement partners. Today, in fact, I reach out to the Canadian Legion, and we're going to ask them to put it out. We work with the Canadian Bank Association, and we've asked them to put it out, and we're having auxiliaries across Ontario, or auxiliary police officers, to disseminate to the financial institutions. I did a drive home show with CBC in London. Feel free to jump on it. It really explains the grandparent scam in full detail. But we wanted to do this to get throughout all of our communities in Ontario. So as mentioned, if you do suspect you're a victim, or you know someone who has been, we're encouraging folks to report to their local police of jurisdiction. Typically, they have online reporting now, and the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre has online reporting. There's a phone number. As I said, it's difficult to get through some days, but our call takers are incredible, and they take the time to help support our victims and direct them in what to do. If you have had your identity stolen or compromised, ensure to report it to TransUnion and Equifax. You can put flags on your accounts, and it's always good to check your credit accounts to see if any accounts have been opened. Our largest reporting to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre is identity theft and fraud. As I mentioned, here is our Partners at Anti-Fraud. As I mentioned, businesses, organizations, and the public can sign up for this. It's free of charge. You'll get bulletins, trends, and media releases that we have. And there we are. We are ready for questions.
Thank you so much. I was just about to ask you, can we share the link to the e-bulletin and to the press releases? So thank you. It's in the chat box now, partners@antifraud.ca. So we do have a bunch of questions for you. I think this is a topic that is really people are itching to know more. So we'll start with one on, because you mentioned data in the prairies in Ontario and BC. Do you have any percentages or data about the Maritimes regarding frauds and scams?
Yes, we do, and we can share that. So basically what happens is when any reporting comes into the Canadian Fraud Center, we identify where the victims are from, and that's how we're able to classify what the trends are. We identify how many reports we received, how many victims we have, and their losses. Typically the Maritimes, as we said, it's population based, and there's not a significant amount of victims that we would see in Ontario, but we can certainly share those numbers.
Great, thank you. We have a question regarding, so when you receive scams or fraud calls or text messages, what is the best way to protect yourself from those? Like, how can you make them stop, other than obviously blocking the number or changing your own number? Is there a way that people can get on a no-call list? How does it work?
So our focus this year for Fraud Prevention Month is on the tools of the trade of the fraudsters, and they're utilizing technology more than ever now to spoof. They're spoofing phone numbers, they're spoofing websites, they're creating spoofed emails. And what I'm saying by spoofed emails, they're going to go onto Gmail and then create John01 and then maybe John02 when it's been taken down. So what we do at the Canadian Fraud Center is we actually disrupt those. We send bad emails, bad bank accounts, bad information on websites to whatever companies host these websites or financial institutions so they can deplatform these folks. The challenge right now is a lot of the phone calls that we're getting is voice over internet protocol. So you can be from anywhere around the world and you can make it look like you're from a certain company. The CRTC invoked legislation is December last year to have the telcos put in more robust prevention software to stop these calls. So now typically you'll see what it wants to show you and where it's actually the actual number. The CRTC actually has a spam a website where you can actually report your spam, text message and what have you. So we can get that off to you folks as well. If you have been defrauded on a social media platform, for instance, Facebook, Instagram, what have you, you can actually go to report abuse on there. And so it's just like policing. It's a complaint-driven sort of organizations where the more complaints they get on something like this, the more likelihood that they'll be disrupted. And when I mean disrupted, they'll actually shut down those accounts. We actually had a head of the police services board in Toronto area have his whole Facebook spoofed, where they took every single image and recreated that identically and threw comments on there to make it look legit. And they were asking for donations. So these fraudsters are going after everyone and everyone. So again, if you have an opportunity on social media, what have you, to report the abuse, that's a great tip, and to report at the Canadian Fraud Center. Okay.
But so in terms of the phone-based one, can a person do anything prior to, like if they haven't fallen for the fraud, they just want the text messages and the calls to stop, what do they do?
Yeah, I know companies like TELUS, you can pay $10 extra a month to have anti-fraud, anti-spam sort of abilities. Okay. It's very difficult, as I said, to disrupt some of these voice over internet numbers. Your phone number, you don't actually own it. It's issued to you, right? So when you have these voice over internet numbers, there's different companies around the world that will reissue them to technology companies, and the fraudsters can utilize them. The best advice I say is hang up and just delete that text. Or if you have like WhatsApp or something like that, you can actually block it or report the abuse.
Okay.
Yeah, Benedict, sorry. And John, I'm just going to add to that. I know sometimes in your phone, the settings, if it's a cell phone, you're embedded somewhere deep in your settings is, for mine, it's just a toggle and it says caller ID and spam protection. And I do notice a difference if I have clicked it and not. Some phone calls do get, like, I don't hear them, I don't see them. Same with text messages. It filters out a good number of them. Not to say I don't still get spam, but it does help.
Great, thank you. We're going to work our way down the list. There are quite a few. So there's an interesting one, and I'm not sure actually of that answer. If somebody's asking, do you also investigate things that have to do with prescription frauds that are faxed to pharmacies? That's a bit of a curveball.
Yeah, so within the Anti-Rackets branch of the Ontario Provincial Police, we have a health fraud unit. Health Ontario doesn't have their own investigators. They contract out the OP. So in the province of Ontario, we actually do have a unit, and we work with our Organized Crime Bureau to investigate these prescription frauds. And it's prolific. We're seeing, drug addicts and people wanting to get the drugs, and so they're going to do whatever they can to manipulate the system. So if you do know someone who is involved, you can report it to the police, especially in the OP.
Thank you. Now we've talked about data about people who are victims of fraud. Do you have any information or data on who the fraudsters are?
As I mentioned before, like our extortion frauds typically originate out of India, and you can go to Scammer Payback on YouTube and you can watch some of their videos. We know a considerable amount of our romance frauds and business email compromise originate out of West Africa. So they're globalized. Let's face it, Canada has our own fair share of scammers within every province that are targeting people elsewhere around the world. So we're actually seeing a lot younger generation of people jumping into scams, maybe conducting data breaches or attempting data breaches and what have you. So just like any other organized crime group, they make up every sort of cultural background, or they come from everywhere around the world.
Thank you. But yeah, I think it's important to always keep in mind that this is rarely a one-person operation that's doing this. It's always a much bigger kind of organized system.
Yeah, I always say that the fraud pays for the drugs and the guns.
Yeah, lovely. We have a question about prosecution rates. Do you have a sense of how many of the perpetrators are actually held accountable for these kinds of crimes?
Yeah, we worked recently with CBC. They did a 4-part series. You can check out CBC Toronto. They actually did a deep dive into the prosecutions. The challenge we're having is that with COVID, the courts are backlogged. Ministry of Attorney General is trying to resolve this backlog. They received a large amount of funding, but you ask most Crown attorneys, they have no interest in these type of investigations. They're almost seen like as a property crime. So we're trying to raise that awareness. We're trying to work with our Ministry of Attorney General. We're trying to work with different police services and increasing the understanding of how to investigate them. But we're also doing the same thing with the public and encouraging the public on what to do when they have been a victim in order to help us investigate these crimes in order to have successful prosecutions. So we don't have specific stats readily available here, but let's just say it's a low amount of prosecutions or arrest based on the number of frauds that we're seeing.
Okay, so that was a lot of information, and I'm not shutting anything down yet. There's many more questions, but just if we were to summarize, what are like top 3 strategies that people can implement or learn about to help protect themselves and each other? If you were to like summarize in kind of like 3 bullet points.
Well, I think our motto with the Canadian Fraud Center, right? Like report, reject, and stop it, essentially. That's the way to do it. Aaron and Lisa?
Sorry, John, you'll have to repeat what you said. My internet connection cut you out.
Yeah, I think they're asking what are the top 3 things to do. I think the first one, so we have 6 steps. If you go to the Canadian Fraud Center webpage, if you have been a victim, it's 6 steps on there. Once you have been a victim, we always say, so we're talking about preventing it. Well, preventing it is you recognize that what's coming at you, reject it, don't fall victim into it, and then report it. I think those are the best 3 methods. Take a pause, take your time. Go on to any sort of search engine and type in whatever you think that fraud is plus fraud. You'll be amazed on how much information is out there. I always tell people, be your own detective. Go online, and if it's a company and they've thrown out a name, research that company online. If it's a phone number, you can do a Google search. If it's an address they want to send the money to, you can check out that on Google Streets and Maps. So all these things you can do, we call in policing called open source information, right? Find that information that's open to you. And I think that's the best recommendation I have. What about you, ladies?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not sure if we're over 3 right now or not, but I know Lisa and I and John, we always emphasize the point, if anything is unsolicited, don't go with it. I mean, if someone comes to your house and offers to put in a reverse osmosis water system, were you looking for a reverse osmosis water system? No. Do not let people come to you with things, or companies, investment opportunities, situations. Go find them on your own. If you're getting a phone call, it's unsolicited, you haven't, called your bank or called whomever, just ignore it, hang up. Don't feel rude hanging up. And same with emails. Ignore the unsolicited emails as well.
Yeah, and just reiterating what John said earlier, just slow it down. There's no reason to be rushing to reply to a text message or click on links or anything like that. Slow it down, really, take a look at where the message is coming from, and reach out to family or friends to, get a second opinion. There's nothing wrong with that, because often, outside person can kind of see things differently and, recognize maybe it's a scam, or maybe it's.
That's a very good advice. Always kind of talk it through with somebody else, because they will have a fresh perspective on it, even if you are starting to get sucked into something. Speaking of intrusive emails, somebody is asking, they have lots of friends who receive an email where the email address is correct. It is somebody they know. And the email is something like, can you do me a quick favor? I need X. Send me an iTunes gift card or something like that. How is this happening? How is it a spoofed email address? Is it that their email has been broken into? What can the person do to the person who is receiving these emails? Can they do anything about it?
Yeah, you'll typically see friends on Facebook saying, hey, if you receive a friend request, it's not from me, like someone has compromised. So the scammers look for information on data breaches and what have you, whether it's passwords, what have you. And so they'll grab that information, they'll reset your password, they can get into your email if they've had that compromised, and then they're going to send a blast out to all your contacts. So just be mindful of that. We always say, call these people on another form of communication. Maybe text them, maybe, give them a phone call directly and say, hey, look, I got this weird email from you, or is everything okay? Check the source.
Okay, great. We have a question, actually, it's more of a request for, do you have anyone who would speak to a seniors group face-to-face about these things, for like a group presentation? Is that something that the OPP does?
Yeah, the OPP does that in your, so we have community services officers that are police officers that work in communities. If it's anywhere else in Canada. So the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center, we have our senior support unit. You can send a request to our partners and ask for a presentation. We're there to help. We can do it virtually. If it's not too far away, we can do it physically. And most police services across Canada have their own community services section that can do that.
Great. That's really useful. And so that's by emailing the partners at, I'm just going to put it back in the chat box, partners at cafc.ca. Is that it?
Yeah, it's on the screen there. Yeah.
It's on the screen there. Oh, sorry. I've got the chat box open. Didn't see it. Partners at antifraud.ca. Thank you. We had a question. That one is also very interesting. Recently, there's been a few headlines about people who had their homes sold from underneath them. They did not know about it. So how can somebody else, how can somebody prevent the fraudulent sales of their homes? And can somebody actually put a lien on your home without your knowledge? How does that work?
Yeah, so they're probably referring to the CBC article that I did with CBC Toronto. It was a Toronto police investigation. There was actually a lawyer that came forward and worked with police, and were able to identify the suspects and conduct arrest. Essentially, when you have a property and you're going to sell it, you can get title insurance, and then they'll do their due diligence through that method. But what's happening is they're having people become straw buyers and come in and basically try and process the sale of a house fraudulently. There's measures in place to prevent this, but a lot of the times there's bad actors within different organizations that help this happen. So I don't want to make it seem like everyone's sitting at home and the title from their house is going to be ripped from underneath them and there's going to be a mortgage that's going to be applied. It's very limited crimes that occur in this sense. Title fraud does happen quite a bit, but we did a webinar just recently with title insurance companies, and they're trying to mitigate these losses. But the CBC article has great information on that.
If you have the link for that and you can pop it in the chat box, that would be wonderful. Meanwhile, I'm going to work my way through the many questions that are still coming in. So we've had a couple of comments both in the chat and the Q&A about people sometimes going to report to the law enforcement agency and kind of either there's not a lot of follow-up or they're told that this is a civil complaint and nothing much happens after that. So is there any recommendations on how to push that and insist and push that forward?
Yeah, it's interesting because Lisa, Aaron, and myself work in concert to try and educate our frontline members. You have to remember police officers are jack of all trades in most sense. You know, they may have 20 calls for service that day and fraud may be one of them, domestic, sexual assault, robbery, what have you. So some of these members, there's a lack of education where we're trying to jump that up. A lot of it has to do with resourcing. We've seen a lot of defunding of the police. Technical investigations take a lot of time, resources, and we need technology. So there is a change of foot in policing to do that. But what I always say is policing is a complaint-driven organizations. So if you're not getting the response you want, you can ask to speak with the person's sergeant and move it up to that level or their supervisor. And you know, I always say squeaky wheel gets the grease when it comes to this. We've conducted presentations with Crown attorneys where we've showed police officers on screen, here's these scenarios, what do you think? And most of them, 50% of the time, say it's civil. I can attest to, you know, bankruptcy frauds. A lot of that has fraud or criminality involved. So, you know, I think it's educating our members, but you're absolutely right. If they do feel that they're not getting the traction they want or they do care and attention, to report it to their supervisors and keep on following up with that. Great.
We're almost at 2 p.m. Eastern, so I think we probably should wrap it up. But I guess I'll ask one more question because there seems to be a lot of questions about crypto scams. And I see the last one here says, are crypto scams targeting seniors other than online, like on the phone?
Yeah, so the suspects know that there's this crypto craze out there. People are interested in it. So they're going trying to hit you at whatever angle they can. It may be a text message. I got one yesterday on WhatsApp, you know, talking about being added to a group to learn more about cryptocurrency. You'll see emails come in. You're going to see text message come in. They target everyone and anyone. As I said, the new demographic we're seeing is people under the age of 60 falling victims to these crypto investment frauds. The Ontario Securities Commission has a great website on cryptocurrency and learning about it. If you're going to look into cryptocurrency, talk to a financial advisor. You can go to exchangers like CNPEA or Binance, and they have very robust information on cryptocurrency education to the public. So I think that's where you should go first before deciding to jump into the cryptocurrency space.
Okay. Great. Rayan, I think you're planning a cryptocurrency webinar soon. So if you want to talk about this briefly, I think it's time.
Thank you. Yes, I see lots of inquiries about that. And we knew that was also on our radar before this webinar. So we have reached out with the team from the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. And we just actually got information this morning indicating that yes, they are interested in partnering with us to do that. So stay tuned. We'll be posting that, hopefully get a date and let everybody know about that. And possibly our John may be attending. I'm not quite sure who we'll have as a speaker, but we'll keep you informed of that. So lots of great questions. I know you know, from what everybody's been saying, I know the house mortgage as well is a big problem. We've seen that on the news as well. So it's so hard to get everything covered in 1 hour, but we do try our best, and we do thank our speakers for sharing their expertise and the prevention and bringing it more to our awareness about what we can do to pay attention. If it's not happening to us, maybe to our loved one or an older neighbor. Just creating those conversations in our community is so important to do. John, if you don't mind just stopping your screen share, and I will just pull up, thank you. I'm just going to show this. So just in continuing on some of the conversations that we are doing, as I said, we host that webinar that's coming up. We also have a conference coming up in 2 days. If people are interested in learning more specifically around interventions, we have a panel that is going to talk about legal clinics that provide some support in terms of some response to consumer fraud from the Pro Bono Ontario. So if you look at our, go to the website and register. After you register, we'll put you in the system and you can see our program of speakers, etc. We'd be glad to have you. I think we have over 300 or 400 people registered at this point. So lots of interest in some of those sessions. Our website also has lots of resources for people to download, some in multiple languages. So if you go under our fact sheets under tools, under fact sheets, you'll see lots of resources. Under financial, there's a whole listing of things that you can download there. If individuals want some navigation to services, you can call the senior support line. That's run by the Assaulted Women's Helpline that can provide some support and navigation for individuals to get connected with services. And as I say, we do have a resource directory and a number of flyers for individuals in French and English. I know these are available for people to download. And just lastly, before we wrap up, we do, again, just remind people about our evaluation. If you don't mind taking a couple minutes to fill that out after the session. Contact for Benedict for the Canadian Network. Join up for their newsletter as well. I'm not sure if Benedict informed people that they do have a online newsletter. It's full of great information and resources and that you can sign up online on their website. And also our website as well. You can sign up to get updates if you're not already. Subscribe to get all the notifications about our upcoming events, conferences, new materials, etc. So thank you so much again for participating. Thank you all for our ASL for joining us today and for your great questions. Because I think if you have a question, I'm sure someone else has that same question as well. We're sorry we weren't able to get to everybody's response, but we do try our best. Perhaps you'll be able to join our future webinars. We will be posting, as I say, the links that were posted in the chat box today, the PowerPoint presentation and the recording within the next day, hopefully onto our websites for both CNPEA and EAPO. So thank you, Benedict, again for partnering. Do always appreciate collaborating to get this information Canada-wide. Because it's not just people that living within Ontario. And as we can see today, we've had people from across different jurisdictions joining us today. So thank you all. Have a good day, and we will see you at our next event. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.